This week on Evolving Humans, part 1 of my 2-part discussion with Philip Hasheider about his book, 6 Minutes in Eternity. Learn how a near-death experience changed the lives of a Wisconsin farmer and his wife, and how life changes, yet remains the same. Welcome to Evolving Humans, the podcast for awakening souls. I'm your host, Julia Marie. Settle in and get ready for another spirited conversation. Philip Hasheider is a farmer, writer, and local historian. He's the author of over 30 books on farming, local history, and family stories. He lives with his wife Mary on a farm in south-central Wisconsin. The farm, and their pasture-raised beef cattle, became a part of his near-death experience story. You can contact him at philiphasheiderbooks@gmail.com or on his Facebook page at Philip Hasheider Books. Welcome to Evolving Humans, Philip. Thank you for sharing some of your time with us.
Well, thank you, Julia Marie. I really appreciate the opportunity to explain my experience, and hopefully it may be of use to others, and we'll see.
Well, before we dive into your story, I'd like to know what it was like growing up in Philip's house.
Oh, well, it was a 3-generational family farmhouse. My grandparents lived with us, and I say us, it was with my parents, and I have 5 siblings, so there were 6 of us, plus my parents, plus my grandparents. That was 10 around the kitchen table every morning. It was a great experience for me. I didn't realize how great at the time, but interacting with our grandparents and my parents at the same time really has left me with a lot of foundation for my life, a lot of memories, things that I've tried to write about in other ways outside of this book, to try to explain what farming means to a rural family. And so my background is agriculture. I did go to college at Madison, graduated, but that's not as important as the life lessons I learned while I was on the farm, which have stayed with me as much as my university learning has.
Well, I totally agree with you. My grandparents were dairy farmers, and some of the best memories that I have from my childhood were spending time on Grandma and Grandpa's farm, mucking around in the cow manure and watching them milk the cows. There's nothing like that kind of experience. And you were blessed with having a multi-generational experience growing up, which I don't think there's any substitute for. What inspired you to write 6 Minutes in Eternity, and who did you write it for?
I wrote it for myself initially because I was trying to understand what I had experienced. I made notes. I had a really difficult time after I realized that I was still here, because I call it or describe it as an interdimensional confusion. It was like I had one foot still in that dimension, but yet I had my other foot here in this one. And it took a long time to sort out the feelings and the awe that I saw, and trying to reconcile that with what I experienced here every day. I had a wonderful experience. Now, some people have said they don't have a great experience, but that wasn't mine. Mine was just absolutely wonderful. And to come back here in the reality of a lower density energetic level, which is what we are, was really difficult because I don't want to say euphoria, but just the overall welcoming, the love, the acceptance and welcoming that I felt in that other dimension was something that I was a stark contrast to coming back here. So again, I wrote it to try to understand my thoughts, what I had experienced, to try to make sense of it. And it took me a long time to do that because I was trying to find human words that would approximate or be equivalent to what my energetic sense was in that other dimension, because I didn't have a physical body as we understand this.
Mhm.
It took a little bit for me to regain my equilibrium here. And I attribute that to being in a place that has no time, no space, no physical essence, but a spiritual one, which is a big portion of my story and understanding how I relate to it, what I make of it now.
What did happen that beautiful October morning?
The first place I went that that morning was out to our farm's pasture to go check on our grazing beef cattle, which I did every morning. And I didn't expect anything unusual to happen that morning, but I went out there to check on them. And every morning, even the morning before, when I went out there, I could get up to them close. I could walk amongst them, pet them, talk with them, and they wouldn't really pay me any attention. And so when I checked any other morning to make sure everything was okay, well, then I left. That morning, I didn't get 200 feet to them. They were all lying down in the middle of the field. It's a 50-acre pasture. And one of them jumped up, looked at me, had perked her ears forward, and took off at a gallop across the field, stopped about 400, 500 feet away, turned around and looked at me. Well, that got the attention of all of the other 26 head that were lying down there. And they got up and looked at me, and they took off running across the field until they got next to the other one. And they stopped, and all of them turned around to look at me. I had absolutely no idea what they were doing because that had never happened before. Well, I didn't think anything of it or much of it. So I turned around and I went back to our farmyard. And that morning I had scheduled to have the car tires replaced in our local village, which was 12 miles away. So I grabbed my gym bag in case I thought afterwards I could have a little workout session at our local hospital's rehab fitness room, which they had a exercise program available to local residents, and I had been going there for the 5 previous months. Well, I got into our town, and I realized I had enough time ahead of getting the tires changed. So instead of turning right to do that, I turned left and went to our hospital's building. Parked, went downstairs, changed clothes, came back up, said hi to the staff members that were in there, stretched, sat down and did 20 arm curls. I mean, not really strenuous. I got up, and the strangest thing happened. I looked down at both of my forearms because they were tingling like they had fallen asleep. And that's the last thing I remember. And one moment I'm standing next to this arm curl chair station. In the next moment, I find myself in a completely different dimension. Um, I best explain it because there are no human words for a lot of the stuff I experienced. But to equate it to something, I felt like I was floating on a raft of some sort. But I wasn't floating on water. I was floating on energetic waves that I could see that were coming towards me. And not only were they coming towards me, they were passing me and continuing on. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. I had no other thing to compare it to until I looked up. And what I will describe in human terms is more than this, but this is what I can understand. I saw this gigantic golden yellow pulsing sphere. It would be like if you packed 10 million suns into a round globe. It was that brilliant. But not only was that brilliant, it was sending out these waves of energy that were welcoming. It was pure love. It was truth. It was knowledge. And I could reach out, even though that was this, looked like it was a gigantic burning thing, I could reach out and touch it, like it was asking me to merge with it. And looking at this sphere, I also saw what I'll describe as little sparkles, little jets shooting out all over the surface of this sphere. It would be like if you had a sparkler at a 4th of July parade or something. That little kind of sparkle coming out, shooting off in all different directions. And it was the warmth. I mean, I'm a person who likes to be warm, but this was even beyond that. This was such warmth, inner stuff that I knew at that moment. I can't quantify it, but I knew at that moment that what I was looking at was what I'll call the source of all creation, the divine creator, the God essence, if you want to put a name to it. But it was more than that. It was just this infinite knowledge that was, I knew everything. And the communication was not verbal, but I could understand what it was saying. Well, after seeing that, I turned, as we understand, turning right, left, and that sort of thing here. But I remember turning to see what else was there. And the best way I can describe it is that I saw an infinite multitude of universes and dimensions. And I've used the analogy of, if you take our universe and everything we understand it to be, planets, expansion, depth, stars, and you compress all of that down into what we think might be a single sheet of paper, okay? And then you hang it over here out in this eternal dimension. And then you do that with another one right next to it, and another one right next to that, and another one right next to that, so on. As far into infinity as you can imagine, going vertically, laterally, horizontally, crosswise, whatever direction you can process, is that all of these eternal dimensions and universes were suspended out in this eternal space. But yet, each one of those had an energetic filament that reached up and attached to this, what I'll describe as a spider web-like matrix that surrounded this entire golden sphere. And it was also pulsing and sending that same love, that acceptance, that knowledge, that welcoming, that truth into each one of these other dimensions suspended out in this eternal space. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So I decided to turn around, as we understand, front and back here, to see what was behind me, because it'd be like, going on a road trip here and not looking down the side roads. Well, what I saw when I turned around, I can best use the word, I saw infinity. And that is because the emulsion of eternity acted like a magnifying glass, so that the farther I looked, the clearer everything became. That was my experience. I'm not sure I still understand it, but that's what I saw. And had I known at that moment, but I didn't, and that's where my timelines came in to help me. During that time I was there, back at the fitness center, there were a dozen EMTs and hospital staff furiously working to restart my heart. Had I known that, where I was, but I still hadn't realized that I had died, had I known it then, I still couldn't have called them and told them, don't bother. I like where I am. This is really great. I couldn't say, don't feel bad if you don't get me back, because this is, I'm really happy where I am. And in less than a blink of an eye after that, I found myself no longer in this dimension. I had returned to my body, and that was because they had restarted my heart. So I had been on the longest journey I'd ever taken in 6 minutes. I came back after witnessing an extraordinary experience that would take me a long time to understand, and an even longer time to be able to explain. And yet, on top of all that, it would take me another 7 months before I would be given the answer as to why I returned here, and subsequently am able to talk with you and your audience today. So that is the essence of, there's more to it than that, but that is the nuts and bolts of what my experience was. Now, I've gotten to the point where some people have said, well, how can that possibly be? Well, I don't argue. I just explain. And people can take from it what they want, because when it comes down to it, I'm the only one I need to satisfy. And I'm satisfied that I know my experience was true, because I could not possibly have imagined that sort of thing. One of the interesting things that I've encountered since then is that we all have dreams. I assume everybody has dreams. I mean, I do during the night. I wake up in the morning and I can't quite remember what it was. Maybe a little snippet here and there, but never the full dream. But yet, when I sit, I don't even have to sit, because I see all of this in the background of what I look at, even today, here. I see this dimension that I was in, and the golden sphere, the matrix, the universes. It's all in the background to me. It's not something that is, a couple zillion years away or miles away. It is very real to me. And so the interesting thing is that when I think back to the whole timeline of when I was there, it has not changed one iota. Nothing changes. And I can remember everything as explicitly as when I was there. Now, having said that, I think I experienced more than I did bring back here. But what I do remember has never changed.
Well, I find it very interesting that you spend a lot of time trying to put human words to describe an ineffable, infinite experience. I personally think you did a great job with that. And the fact that you wanted to share how you processed all of that with the rest of us, I admire. You wrote a lot about the aftermath of your NDE, starting with the hospital and the heaviness, disorientation, and exhaustion that you experienced. So, what are your thoughts about what happened there? I personally think it might have been readjusting to the density of 3D versus having the chance to live in the light, but what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree in a lot of what you said. Um, the the hospital stay had to be described to me by other people because for roughly 8 hours after my collapse, I had absolutely no awareness of where I was, other than being in that eternal dimension. I did not realize that I was talking with people here. I did not realize that they were moving me, even though I was awake. The one EMT who was in the ambulance with me said, "Yeah, you were talking with me. I was answering questions. They wanted to keep me engaged," as he said. But I don't remember any of that until about 8 o'clock that night, which which I got the strangest reaction because I happened to be lying on a gurney in the emergency room, and I saw my wife at the end of my feet. She was rubbing them, and I couldn't understand why she was there. And then I looked to my left, and our son and our daughter were there, and she had her fiance with her, and I couldn't understand why they were there because what are you doing in the fitness center? And they said, "Well, you're not in the fitness center, you're in the emergency room." And I said, "Oh, what happened?" And then I was told that I had asked that about 20 times before. But when I was able to comprehend where I was, I saw that it was 8 o'clock. And I said, "Well, that can't be right." And somebody off to the side, I assume it was a doctor, said, "Well, why not?" And I said, "Well, time doesn't run backwards, at least here." And the gentleman said, "Well, it's 8 o'clock at night." And so I realized that there was this whole segment of time where I don't have any memory of what happened. Well, that doesn't bother me because it whether I remember it somewhere down the road or not at this point is immaterial to me because everything started when I collapsed. And the more I've thought about this over the years, for me, the best way to understand it, and maybe it'll be helpful to somebody else, is that I kept getting told that I was lucky. This was after in the aftermath. I was told I was lucky where I was when I was there. That the ambulance service was right across the street, and they could all come running over to assist me. But it had to be more than that. I've never won the lottery, and if I won the lottery in this, I really hit some big odds because why would I be at that particular point in time on that particular morning with all that help available when just an hour earlier I would have been out in our pasture with our cattle And no one would have found me for, 6, 8 hours because Mary was at her job and she wouldn't have got home until late. And then they would have to go look for me. They wouldn't have known where I was. So the chances of surviving something like that are, pretty minimal, if not non-existent. So why I was at that particular place and time with that available help, to me, always meant there was something else behind it. It can't be luck. But again, as I understand it, it was like all of these threads in my life. Some people may call it karma, they may call it something else. But for me, to understand it, it's all of the threads in my life, my actions, particularly that morning. I made a choice to turn left to the fitness center instead of right to get my tires changed, and that made all the difference. But all of these, at the moment I collapsed, all of these threads of my life that had brought me to that particular point, it was like I shot through a prism. And once I came out the other side of that prism, everything looks completely different. And I cannot unsee what I saw in that dimension. I cannot unfeel what I felt while I was there. And so I know that it's real. It's as real to me as I'm sitting here because it stays with me. And it's like a gentle companion for me. Others may not think that, but for me, it's been a confirmation of what I experienced, that I know it's true, and I know it's available, and I know it will be there for others when they leave here. So having that sense has been very satisfying, very pleasurable. I mean, I get the same, interestingly, I get the same welling up inside me and the warmth when I think of it here in this dimension as when I experienced it in that eternal dimension. I get the same feelings. So how can that be that you transfer those feelings back to here when I never had an experience like this before?
Well, I can only say that as you are describing your experience, I'm getting a sense of that warmth and that welling up, and I'm kind of envious that you get to live your whole life with that running in the background now. I've always said that there is no veil, that that's a construct of our human mind, that we make a separation between the physical world and the non-physical world. And just listening to you tell your story, I'm having this insight that maybe the veil is our human existence. And you now have a unique experience of living here, going to where you came from, and somehow pulling that reality back with you into your physical incarnation that must have totally changed how you live in the world, even though you're still doing your Farmer Philip thing, but it's with a different perspective. Well, that's our time for today. Thank you for continuing to support Evolving Humans. If you found value in this episode, please share it with at least 2 other people so that together we can bring more light to this world. If you need guidance or clarity about a life situation, want to reconnect with your friends and loved ones in spirit, or are in need of energy healing, please click on the website link in the show notes for juliamarie.us and smash the Book Now button on the homepage to make an appointment. And now, here's a quote for you to ponder as you go about your day. Death is nothing but a portal to an unseen future. Philip Hasheider.